Hello and welcome to Galactic Wisdom. So, this is a show where I try to expose people to important information, and that information is sometimes hard for people to hear. But the people who watch this show tend to be people who are open to listening to things that might actually be different from the way that they believe. So this is going to be one of those shows where I get people to really think a little bit. And it's okay if you have different opinions from me. I'm not here to dictate anything to anybody. Um, but I hope that some people will consider some of the things that I'm saying. Today, we are going to talk about good and bad, what those words might mean. And we're also going to talk about right and wrong. We're going to talk about the differences between good and bad and right and wrong. And I'm going to start off by letting you know that yesterday I went into LA. Yesterday I drove into Los Angeles because I used to live there. I live about 2 hours north of LA. I used to live there. I have a lot of friends there. I have family who are there. And I drove into LA so that I could uh, attempt to see if any of my good friends needed any assistance. And if you've been watching the fires on the news, obviously you know that what is going on in LA right now is a pretty terrible thing. And when I was there, it's not a very pleasant sight to be coming into LA. You start to get the warning messages coming up on your phone that the air quality isn't very good. You start to see the ash falling like light white snow around you, and the air feels baked. It feels warm, and there is a orange glow in the sky above the fires. And this has been a terrible tragedy for a lot of people. And I came close to experiencing this a few months ago when a fire was approaching my home. And the fire was getting close enough that I was issued evacuation warnings. I was told that I might need to evacuate and I should stand by. And then, when I was wondering if I should take this evacuation warning seriously or not, I got told I need to evacuate. I got the evacuation order. And then I found myself in a situation where, as probably some of you have seen on the news, people talking about, you're going to evacuate, what do you take with you? An evacuation order, that's a legal order to leave. I had to leave. What am I going to pick up from around my home? And I decided to look out, climb to the top of the local mountain, look out to see was I in any immediate danger. And I could see the smoke, the fire in the distance, and I determined that I had a little bit of time to safely put some more things in my car. But it was still terrible. I was loading up my car with all of my most valuable possessions, trying to figure out what am I leaving behind. I filled my car completely full. There almost wasn't room for me in it. And then I drove to a local evacuation center. I walk into the evacuation center where you can sleep overnight if you want to. And it was wonderful to have people there taking care of people who are in an evacuation situation. But I decided I'd be more comfortable sleeping in my car, so I slept in my car. And the next morning, I went to Home Depot. I bought some hoses, and I went back to my property, which thankfully was still there. And I wetted the house, I wetted the surroundings, and I stood by to see if there was anything that I could do to save my property. Fortunately, the firefighters in my area were uh, sufficiently proficient at what they do that they stopped the advance of the fire towards my neighborhood, and my house was saved. But I've gone through that feeling of, wow, am I going to lose my home? Now, fire insurance where I live is too expensive. It's really hard to find, and it's too expensive for me to pay, so I can't afford insurance. I don't have a high-powered job where I receive a huge income. I'm probably, if you work it out, I make less than minimum wage on an hour-to-hour basis with what I do, which is stuff like this. Um, so if I had have lost my home, that would have been it. And me and the people, lots of people around the world, and certainly people in the Pacific Palisades right now are asking the question, why? Who is to blame for this? Why is this going on? And the answer is the true, real answer is not very easy for a lot of people to hear, because um, a lot of people who are around the world are causing climate to change. And this is a hard message to hear, that if we don't change, then the climate is going to continue to change. And if we don't change, then some of our actions may be responsible for some of the lives lost, some of the homes that have been injured. Now, if I walk up to somebody and I punch them in the face, not that this is the kind of thing that I typically would do, but I walk up to somebody, I punch them in the face. It's pretty obvious that I'm responsible for that. Like, it's a direct cause and effect right there, right then. A lot of people, I would say most people on our planet today, don't realize that many of the actions that we take cause results which are just as negative as being punched in the face, maybe more, but we don't realize it. We're isolated from the effects of what we're doing. And I'm going to talk just a little bit about that today before I go into the good and the bad and the right and wrong. And it's all connected. It's all connected. But let's give you an example. If I walk into a store and I buy a food product that has within it, let's say, palm oil. Now, I might be thinking, now a lot of people don't look at what ingredients are in that food. They just buy food that they like. A lot of people might not realize if they have any ingredients in any food in their home that have within those foods the ingredient palm oil. So that sort of detaches people from feeling like they're responsible for any effects of buying palm oil. So what's wrong with buying palm oil? What's wrong with buying products with palm oil in it? Well, most of the palm oil that is in the food products that we buy comes from the areas in Borneo where there are rainforests. And in order to grow enough palm oil to put in all of these foods, what happens is the rainforests in Borneo are being wiped out. They're being destroyed. The natural rainforests are being cleared completely in order to clear the land, in order to grow palm trees in a very like factory farmed way, palm trees that can be farmed for their oil. So if you're buying palm oil, you're responsible for the cutting down of rainforest, and you're responsible for all of the suffering that causes to animals. Take, for example, the orangutans. Orangutans live in the rainforests of Borneo, and they don't live in a whole lot of other places. This is their home. And if we go to a store and we buy a food product that has palm oil in it, what we're doing is we're giving money to the companies that are going around destroying rainforests, and in the process, pushing orangutans to the point of extinction. And also, those rainforests are great ways of taking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and replacing it with oxygen. And therefore, it's buying palm oil products in a shop is contributing directly to climate change. But the people who buy products with palm oil in, they're not bad people. They wouldn't want to hurt others. They're just separated from the knowledge that they are paying for climate change to happen. That is a direct cause and effect. It's not one that you can see, like walking up to somebody and hitting them in the face in person. So it's a hard lesson to learn. It's a moral lesson that requires being educated in this subject in order to get it. And me just saying it, well, I might not be telling the truth. So in order for you to know this, you would have to go away and do a little bit of your own research and prove it to yourself that what I'm saying is true. Before it becomes knowledge to you, you would have to go away and do a little bit of proof. So we're in a situation where acquiring knowledge is not easy. Believing that you're not a bad person and you're not causing any harm, that's easier. Acquiring knowledge is not easy. It requires time, effort, research, and being moral requires knowledge. So being moral is not easy because we might be causing harm to other people and other organisms on this planet without realizing it. If you buy a product with palm oil in it, and that's just one of many ingredients that are directly responsible for climate change, you are contributing a little bit directly to the lives that have been lost in LA, the homes that are being lost in LA, the homes that were lost in Asheville, North Carolina a few months ago with the great flooding that happened there, and all of the climate change issues, deaths and suffering going on around the world that you don't even know about. In order to be moral, in order to be good or bad, good or right in your actions, we need to know stuff. But a lot of people don't like learning new stuff. So people who watch my show, I think, come to my show and listen because they're open to learning things, because they want to be a better person. And that's really what my show is about, is trying to help people to learn, to become better people through learning, through gaining knowledge or enlightenment. Now, I have gone into fire zones before to try and save animals. When it must have been about 10 years ago, there was a fire also in the LA, general rough LA area, an hour or two outside of LA, in Malibu Creek State Farm. That's a location where they used to film things like MASH, and they had the sets for I can't remember the name of the thing. Lots of shows out there. They have sets out there where they no, it's on the tip of my tongue. What's that? Something World, where they have the robots living out there in the desert. Westworld, that's the thing. They had all the sets out there, and the whole thing burned down because of a wildfire. Now, I had gone hiking there about 2 weeks before that fire, and it was a beautiful place, and then it burnt down, and I was shocked when that happened, and I was worried about all of the wildlife that was there. So I went in, I snuck past the police barricades, and I had to hike in on foot for quite a long way, but I went in there to see if I could save any animals. And it's an apocalyptic scene. Everything has been destroyed, and the animals are lying dead on the floor, the wild animals all around, a lot of rabbits. The only things that seemed to survive that were the deer, but they were roaming around looking for food, and there wasn't any, so I don't know if they did survive in the end. We have been given messages from a few different alien species that this is happening to our planet. What is happening to LA right now, um, this kind of event and what is happening with what happened with the flooding earlier in the year, and even the polar vortices being disrupted and the Arctic temperatures coming in and plunging the eastern states of the US into Arctic weather. This is all caused by climate change. These are all changes that we have been told about by our alien friends. They are and have been for decades trying to tell us that our actions are causing this to happen. And we really need to wake up to this and to, I mean, there are three recommendations that I can give. And I can give these recommendations, and they might sound to people out there listening, I'm going to move a bit closer to the mic, they might sound like beliefs, but I don't have beliefs. That's something I've eradicated from within me. I do my research and I learn stuff so that when I say stuff with conviction, I know I'm not going to be harming people, I'm going to be helping people. So this is knowledge. There are three big ways that people can help not contribute to climate change. One of the biggest contributing factor to climate change is the burning of fossil fuels. So what we need to do is move away from burning fossil fuels. When we turn on our electricity, most of the electricity is coming from the burning of coal, oil, and natural gas. Those are all putting back into the atmosphere carbon dioxide that was taken out of the atmosphere over billions of years by photosynthetic organisms, taken down into the ground, fossilized into coal, oil, and then when we burn it, we put that carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere. We're turning back the atmosphere back millions of years, and we're heating up the planet in the process. So we need to stop burning those fossil fuels. How do we stop burning the fossil fuels? It's hard for individuals, but we do as much as is practically possible to minimize our use of electricity, to minimize transportation of products and manufacturing of products by ordering only what we need from long distances around us. We're sensible with our use of heating, like it's better to put on clothing when it's cold than to put on the heating. But most importantly, we have to vote for, this is the second thing, we have to vote for politicians and parties that back this kind of change from burning fossil fuels to using green, renewable, clean energy sources. This is where it becomes very political, and there's a lot of disinformation that's been given to, especially the US, but also around the world, from politicians who are supported by and who support the fossil fuel industry. We need to move towards green technology, which we've had for well over 100 years. I can make a simple renewable generator. It's simple, easy science. We don't need alien tech to do it. We need to move into using wind. Wind is the main thing that we can use, but also solar energy. We need to move into biofuels, geothermal, tidal. There's so much energy out there. If we were to be using more wind turbines, we would actually be taking energy out of that wind and reducing problems like the one that's going on with the Santa Ana winds outside of Los Angeles. So voting for politicians that are sensible, that are enlightened, and are making moral decisions. The third way, which I think a lot of people just don't know about, is probably the biggest way that human beings can reduce their carbon footprint, and that is to stop eating meat and dairy, to go vegan. And there is so much misinformation out there about this subject, that it's hard for people to determine the truth, even if they're trying to. But that is the truth. In order to have all of those animals out there that we eat, we have to grow plants for them to eat. Way more plants than is required to keep human beings alive if humans were only eating the plants. And so the number one reason for deforestation, the number one reason for deforestation is the meat and dairy industry, to wipe those areas away of their natural plants, which are wonderful at taking carbon out of the atmosphere, carbon dioxide, and to replace them with the growing of plants that are fed to animals. We have enough food on this planet easily to feed everybody. Nobody needs to be poor. Nobody needs to be hungry. If we would just stop feeding all of these huge amounts of plants to all of the animals that we then kill and we eat. If you want to understand this subject more, you have to understand like where energy is lost as it moves through the different trophic levels in ecosystems, in food chains, in food webs. In order to be moral, we need to know stuff. So that is my little bit about the fires that are going on at the moment, about climate change, and about how to reduce climate change. We need to vote for politicians and parties that are going to try to do something about climate change, but they're only going to do that if civilians support them, which at the moment we don't have enough civilians supporting these actions. But voting for the right people, minimizing our own burning of fossil fuels by minimizing our transportation and our electricity use, and cutting down our use of meat and dairy. That's my little piece about the fires, and I'm so sad for the people who are losing their homes. I have family and friends in the area. Fortunately, I think they're going to be okay, but a lot of people are not. But this is all caused by people who are a lot of times unknowingly contributing to climate change. We're now going to look at the subject of good and bad and right and wrong. Now, as a space scientist, I know that science is objective. It's a vast, logical, objective body of knowledge about reality. Morality is different. Morality is subjective. We can all have our different opinions about morality, and none of them are objectively right or wrong. You can objectively be right or wrong about the science of reality that informs your subjective opinion about morality, but morality itself is not something that I can tell you, I know what is right, I know what is wrong, because that comes into personal opinion. There's no universal law about morality that I can uncover an equation for. I'm therefore unable to tell anybody, I'm unable to tell you what is moral or what is right. And I want you to understand that when I move into this subject. A lot of what I'm saying is subjective, but the morality judgments, the morality opinions that I have are subjective, and I understand that. So it's okay for you to disagree with me. What I can do is I can help people to intellectually understand the meanings of different moral words like good, bad, right, and wrong, and the concepts behind them and the philosophical concepts behind those things in a way that will enable us to communicate with each other more accurately, more effectively about the subject of morality. Because when we look at the world today, clearly it's not moral enough. Whatever your opinions about morality are, clearly we can look at the world we can look at the world today and see and understand that in many ways we're failing. I can point out objective, logical inconsistencies in existing moral systems and existing moral practices. I can also help us to think about morality with a more alien perspective, because we all see things from our own eyes, from our own lives, from our own perspectives, from our own experiences. I have alien friends who help me on this subject, who support me on this subject. They support me, I support them. I know their perspectives, and you can too, because they've been very well documented, alien perspectives on morality, if you just listen to the messages that they give to humanity. So I want to just make it clear, if you find yourself disagreeing with any of the things that I say, just understand that I'm not claiming to be correct with morality. These are my own subjective personal opinions. I'm going to talk about a phrase that I use called practically possible. I have a moral strategy that guides me, and that moral strategy is to be as moral as is practically possible to as many conscious beings as is practically possible. This is gonna start to seem like almost a scientist talking about morality, because that's what's happening. I am a scientist talking about morality. I'm trying to define it clearly. My moral strategy is to be as practically possible to as many conscious beings as is practically possible. Why do I have that term, as practically possible? Why is it there? What exactly does it mean? Well, ideally, we would always treat every single conscious being in the universe with the absolute highest levels of morality. However, for a number of different reasons, doing so is rarely practically possible. For a number of reasons. How about this one? Sometimes we just don't have the time to do whatever is required to treat somebody in the most moral way. I wish I had time to still be in LA helping people who needed help. That would be a moral thing for me to be doing, but I don't have time. I have to come away and do this and do other things with my life. I have to try and survive myself, so I can't be helping people nonstop. I don't have enough time. Maybe you don't have enough time in your lives to always treat people in the most moral way. If, for example, you have lots of people messaging you, sending you emails, sending you texts, and it's like, oh, I don't have time to respond to them now, but that might it might seem to them like I'm not being moral if I don't respond. We don't always have time, so we can only be as moral as is practically possible. We need to sleep. Sometimes we're too tired. Being asleep, when we're asleep, we're not helping anybody, but we need to sleep. It's not practically possible not to sleep. So I'm giving you reasons why understanding that we can only do what is practically possible for us in our individual circumstances that's all we can do. A lot of us don't have enough money or resources to act in the most moral way possible. If I had enough money, or if I was a millionaire, I could do a lot more good in this world. I would be helping people in LA right now who are losing their homes. I would be helping to fund projects to educate people. I would be doing far more than I presently am to help people if I had the funding. And there are a lot of people on the planet, and it's not practically possible to help them all. So there are good reasons why all of us are limited in our abilities to be able to help people. So it's not practically possible for us to always be moral to everybody, but as much as is practically possible, it's good to be as moral as is practically possible to as many conscious beings as is practically possible. That's my moral strategy. We all live in different situations in our lives. Some people have less time to devote to being moral than others. Some people need more sleep than others. Some people have less money than others. So the things that are practically possible for one person to do might not be practically possible for another. And so it really isn't fair to go around judging others for how moral or not they appear to be. That's really important, because that's intellectually does make perfect sense. Intellectually, that is correct. And yet Most people judge others according to how they themselves would act, which is not valid because we're not them. They are not us. It really isn't fair to go around judging others for how moral or not they appear to be. We have no idea what their lives are like, what challenges or hardships they have in their lives, or how hard they're trying to be moral. We don't know what's practically possible for them. Today, it might seem a little bit like I am judging you. However, please understand that I am not, because I understand that everyone's lives and situations are different. For me to judge you wouldn't be fair. So what I'm really trying to do is with this show is to expose people to the intellectual ideas that and the knowledge that goes along with them in my position with my alien friends, with my knowledge about reality and morality. I'm exposing people to ideas and knowledge that will help, hopefully, to inform you in ways that you can then make decisions about whether your lifestyles could be more moral, could help others more. That's really what I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to judge you. Let's talk about good and bad. Good can be defined as something that increases the well-being of one or more conscious beings, or something that prevents a decrease in the well-being of one or more conscious beings. Bad can be defined as something that decreases the well-being of one or more conscious beings, or something that prevents an increase in the well-being of one or more conscious beings. Good and bad. In order to understand what is good and what is bad, it helps us to extend our vision of good and bad by asking good for who and bad for who. Let me give an example. If, for example, a mountain lion catches, kills, and eats a deer, it's good for the mountain lion, but it's bad for the deer. I mean, that's obvious. When the way we use our language, that sentence is correct. It's good for the mountain lion, it's bad for the deer. So I could ask the question, was it a good thing or a bad thing that the lion killed the deer? But it's not that simple. You can't answer it with a simple yes or no, which means that we need to raise our level of intellectual thought processing to a higher level before we can really understand the concepts of good and bad. That action was good for the lion, and it was good for the lion's cubs, but it was bad for the deer, and it was bad for the deer's fawn or offspring. Most actions are both good and bad. And whether they're good or bad for you depends on who you are. Good and bad is not as easy as just saying something is good, something is bad. It's most things that go on in this world are good for some people, good for some organisms, and bad for others. Another example. Having our favorite material products shipped to our doors from other countries might be good for us, but all of the transportation vehicles involved create a lot of greenhouse gas emissions. So it can be bad for the people and animals who are affected by climate change. Now, I like ordering stuff from Amazon, and who knows where that stuff is coming from. It's probably made in China and shipped to the US, and then shipped around the US to me here. There's a lot of transportation involved. There's a lot of kinetic energy required to move that. There's a lot of increase in gravitational potential energy if it's flown to me. There's a big carbon footprint involved. Does that make me a bad person for buying stuff on Amazon? It illustrates the point again that knowing stuff is necessary for us to understand whether our actions are good or bad for others. And we have to educate ourselves more about what's going on the planet. Now, it's hard because I do from time to time need to buy stuff from Amazon or order stuff online. So I come back to that phrase, that moral strategy of doing whatever I can that is practically possible. And sometimes I need to do stuff for myself in order to keep myself going and give me the energy and the motivation to keep going. So it's a judgment that I have to make, and it's not an equation. It's not a yes, you're right, yes, you're wrong. It does take personal wisdom and thought and judgment. And it's not okay for me to judge you, and it's not okay for you to judge me. But all of those judgments that we make can be better made if we learn stuff, if we base our moral decisions on knowledge. So that shipping of an Amazon product might be good for us, but it's bad for others because of climate change. The idea that all actions can either be categorized as being absolutely good or absolutely bad is simply incorrect. We can intellectually know objectively that is wrong. Actions are mostly have some good consequences and some bad consequences. They're mostly good for some and bad for others. The only actions that can be categorized as being absolutely good or absolutely bad are, well, let's take absolutely good. The only absolutely good actions are those that are good for everyone. Or if we reword that aren't bad for anyone. If you could do something in your life that doesn't harm anyone, that is good for everyone, then that's an absolutely good act. And I commend anybody that is able to do any absolutely good acts. It's quite a hard thing, but if you think about it, you can do it. So if you like the idea of trying to be an absolutely good person, then it would require you to not be bad at all to any people, animals, aliens, or other conscious life forms. That requires us to learn about how our actions affect others. This is one of the key things I'm trying to put across to people today. You can't be a good person unless you learn about how your actions affect others. And when you do things that are separated from you, like buy something in a store and you don't know how that product came to be in that store, then you don't know how good and bad you are. So learning about where products come from, learn about companies that deliberately have high moral standards so that you can buy products from them and know much more easily that you're not causing harm to others. Let's see. So I'm going to jump ahead a little bit in my notes here. There are ways in which human beings frequently fail to be as good as is practically possible. There are ways that most people on the planet fail to be as good as is practically possible. In the last 10 minutes of this broadcast, I am going to outline 5 really important ways that I observe people in the world failing to be as good as is practically possible. And I'm not saying this so that I can point my finger and say, you're a bad person. I'm saying this without knowledge of who you are. I'm saying this in the hope that some of you who are good people inside, who are empathic, might actually think about the things that I'm saying, and maybe go away and do your own research and figure out, am I right? Because if there's just one person who listens to me, does a bit of research, and then changes the way they live their lives a little bit, then that's a little bit less harm done upon others, and I've done my job. So try to think with an open mind about these 5 things. 1, when humans say, post, or comment, or write bad things about other people, let's say if person A says or posts something negative about person B, it can cause emotional harm, mental harm, and spiritual harm to person B. It's practically possible for you not to do that. It's practically possible for you not to harm person B. It also causes physical harm through incitement, often, to commit a violent act. If you say something bad about somebody else and you're putting it out there for others to see, then those other people might not be as restrained as you. Not that saying something bad about somebody is restrained, but they might go and actually harm that person. And we see that sort of thing happening in our world all the time. Person A may inadvertently or even purposefully, by saying something negative about person B, they can cause, and they often do cause, physical harm to people when person B commits suicide. Because when you have people hating on somebody, that feels very personal. It is very personal to the people it's being hated on, and it can push people to suicide. And often person A doesn't even know that's happened. And often person A doesn't even care that that's happened. Every year, thousands of people's lives are damaged, destroyed, or lost due to people saying bad things about them. Whether person A thinks that the people that they said bad things about deserve to be harmed or not, harming them is not good. It's not a good act. It's not something that a good person does. It's not being good. It's not ascended behavior. And it's not something that our alien friends are going to be happy about. They're going to be turned away by actions like that. That leads to the second way in which human beings fail to be as good as is practically possible. When humans punish, get revenge, get justice on people whom they think deserve it. Stop judging people. You're not those people. You haven't lived their lives. You weren't in those places. You weren't in those situations. Just stop it. We're not good at it. And when we try and judge people, we invariably fail. And if you look throughout history, we see that we failed a lot, and we've resulted in a lot of death and destruction and harm and suffering when we try to judge other people and do what we think is good. But it's not good to harm people. That's the opposite of what the word means. 3, as I've mentioned before, when humans consume meat or dairy, they're responsible for horrific levels of harm to innocent, emotional, conscious beings. Now, when a mountain lion catches and eats a deer, it's not really practically possible for that mountain lion not to try and kill and eat the deer and the animals. That's its only option. But we're not living that kind of survival life with those carnivorous needs and instincts. We go into a shop. We have so many options. We don't have to run and hunt and shoot and kill. We have options. It's practically possible. And in fact, if you look into it, it's so much more healthy to not eat meat or dairy. It's something like 5 out of 6 of the highest, the top causes of death in developed countries is because of eating meat and dairy. It's the cause of cardiovascular disease. It's cholesterol. There's no cholesterol in plants. It's a leading cause of stroke because that's also cardiovascular disease. That's cholesterol building up in the blood vessels in the brain. Diabetes, people think it's because you eat too much sugar, and yes, that it's because you have too much sugar in your blood vessels. But why do you have too much sugar in your blood vessels? Well, yes, it might be because you're eating too much sugar, but it's also because you're building up this plaque caused by cholesterol on the inside of your blood vessels, which prevents the sugar from leaving your blood vessels, holds it in there, and can cause at least one of the types of diabetes. Cancer. Meats are carcinogenic. Dairy is carcinogenic. There is a substance called, what is it called? I forget what it's called. There is a substance in dairy. It'll come to me soon. I'll try and get it before the end of this show. That is carcinogenic, and it is inside dairy. And you feed this substance to to human beings, it turns on cancer cells. You stop consuming it, it turns off the cancer cells. So many people incorrectly believe that we need to eat meat and dairy for the protein, the iron, the calcium. Such beliefs are completely understandable. I'm not judging you, because it's what most of us were taught in school. However, scientifically, it's disinformation. It's incorrect. Protein, iron, and calcium are very plentiful in plant-based foods. When you go into any food store and you see just how plentiful and varied the vegan food options, it becomes very clear that it's completely practically possible for any of us choose to have a plant-based lifestyle. Even if you only have meat and dairy like once a week, even if you cut it down to 5% of what you were having before, that's still doing a great, positive thing. That's still a very good impact you will have on the environment by cutting it down by that much. Number 4, when human beings vote for political parties or politicians whose policies harm others, our world is becoming, this is an important message, I hope people are listening, our world is becoming increasingly unstable. It's moving in a really bad direction. And when we vote for the wrong parties or politicians, it is enough to seriously risk throwing our countries into war. And that, I'm talking about international war. I'm talking also about civil war. And we are pushing this, the world is moving in the wrong direction. And we are becoming increasingly unstable, and we're moving into a period of time in which there is a lot more conflict and aggression, and we can astrally project into the future and we can see what's going on in the future. And bizarrely, now is the moment when casein pops into my head. Casein is was it a protein or an amino acid that is inside meat and dairy that causes cancer? If you can avoid casein, it's a good thing. But voting for people who are not going to throw our world into chaos and destabilize the world and continue to cause all of these problems, that's one of the things that that we need to be doing. But it's what I see is around the world, and it's not just in the US, but around the world, there are people who have, for whatever reason, they think they're doing the right thing by voting in political leaders and political parties that are going to cause the most harm to others. Now, this is a tough lesson to learn, but when we think about lessons of the past, like World War II, and I have a close connection to World War II because my father was born during an air raid on London. His mother was walking down the steps into the air raid shelter, and she said, I can't go any further, I need to give birth. And they said, no, you need to go into the air raid shelter because bombs falling. She said, no. And she stopped and she gave birth to my dad right there on the steps. That's how my father came into the world. His father was away from him throughout his childhood, distributing funds around the Europe to the Allied troops in order to try and stop a dictator who was spreading around the world, trying to take over the world and trying to make it good for just a small number of people. Now, when you're in that small number of people and somebody with power is saying, I'm going to give you power, I'm going to make you important, I'm making everybody else less important, a lot of people, sadly, like that. A lot of people like the personal gaining of power and wealth and importance. And there's a lot of politicians around the world promising people that. And it's a racist philosophy, it's a discriminatory philosophy, and it's pushing us towards more wars. So please learn. And the hard thing here is a lot of people think they're doing the right thing because they've been fed so much disinformation their whole lives that good people can be voting for bad people. And how do you teach them that that they've been misled? That's really hard. Listen to shows like this. Try and, next week I'm going to talk about how do you prove stuff? How do you prove stuff? Because that's important, and that's something I'm going to talk about next week. And the fifth way is what I've just said. The fifth way that people don't realize they're causing harm to others. They don't understand the enough knowledge to know that they're causing harm to others. So learning is so important. And I could talk more about that, but I've just about run out of time. I would like to share with you one or two things. I have a place where you can go, a group, a Patreon group, and it has in the middle of it a big join for free button. And if you join that group and go to the collections tab, then you can learn from the videos, lots of videos that I've got out there. And here is the website. I encourage people to join that group, to learn more, to be on this journey with me. And I'm looking around me because my alien friends have just arrived. And so I encourage people to please join me. This evening, I am going to be reaching out to the Galactic Council every Thursday evening on that website. You can join me if you want to. I am next Tuesday going to be astrally projecting to the beings who revealed themselves to Flight 564. It's a famous UFO case. We're going to be talking to somebody that was on board that flight and connecting with those beings. I also in that website, I do spiritual healing sessions. We reach out to a number of different beings. So I would like to thank everybody here who is watching. I care about you, and I am so grateful to you for caring enough about others that you are here listening to me. I wish you peace, love, and happiness. Goodbye for now.